Frederik Booysen, and my name is Sevias Guvuriro. We are both based in South Africa. My talk is actually on incentivized dictator game with a symmetric giving and taking frame employing an artefactual field experiment. And our subjects in this study are young South African adults. There is actually mixed evidence with respect to the level of generosity and altruism when dictator game is framed as a giving or a taking exercise. Some studies show that it is greater in the giving frame, while others show that it is actually greater in the taking frame. And Chaudhuri actually reported equivalence in terms of these two frames, but associated that equivalence with the offsetting gender effect. And in our study, right, which employs a non-weird developing country field setting, and so therefore it is more of an extra laboratory field context, the study actually executes the dictator game in giving and taking frames in a within subject design and across social distances. So there are three measures of altruism, which include a dummy measure of non-zero allocation, and then a transfer of multiples of 10 from 0 to 100, and a social discounting rate. Our participants we have 187 participants, and 95 of them are females. And this actually study was carried out in a poor informal urban setting. And of course, we obtained an ethical clearance, and so participation in this study was voluntary. So procedurally, an isomorphically equivalent dictator game with a giving and taking frame and within a social distance framing is actually carried out. So we have 8 social distances, from 1 for the closest person and 100 the stranger. And we also counterbalance on framing and social distances, right? In terms of payment, 10% of the participants were randomly selected using status symbol commands. And then for each of the selected participants, there is a random selection between the giving and the taking frame, right? And after selecting whatever a specific frame, the next then we had to select 1 out of the 8 social distances, and that is actually then implemented for actual payment. And on average, participants and recipients earn an amount which is between $3 to $4. In terms of the instrument, right? On the giving frame, the dictator starts with 100 rand for each social distance and makes decision on the amount to give to the person at that social distance. But when it comes to the taking frame, the person placed at a given social distance by the dictator starts with 100 rand, and the dictator then decides on how much to take out of that 100 from that person. Our measures, as I indicated earlier on, there are 3 of them. The first is a dummy variable, non-zero allocation, where 0 means transferring nothing and 1 means transferring a non-zero amount. And the second one is the transfer, which shows the multiples of 10, the amount that we actually transferred. And then we have the social discounting rate, which was calculated using the Excel solver toolkit and employing the hyperbolic discounting function. And in terms of analysis, while step 1 carries out a descriptive and bivariate analysis comparing study outcomes across task frames and including cumulative distribution curves, step 2 constitutes the Hurdle regression model and the quantile regression model. The Hurdle regression model here is appropriate because it is a 2-step model in which the first step adjusts for the likelihood of non-zero allocation, and the second step shows the amount transferred contingent upon the non-zero allocation. The quantile regression is appropriate for a non-normal distributed social discounting rate. So we actually have overall task frame, dummy effects, and gender subsample framing effect analysis. And also some of our analysis focus on the stranger sub-symbol that is for the person who is at number 100. And the other analysis focus on the full symbol. In terms of our hypothesis, right? Chowdhury and others, 2017, they actually argue that the giving frame makes the dictator's property right over the endowment salient, whereas the taking frame introduces salience of the recipient's property right over the endowment, right? It is also argued that giving frame introduced what we call the endowment effect, which is the increased value of the endowment to the subject holding it. So our hypothesis number one then is due to the entitlement effect, endowment effect, and the greater moral cost of selfishness, altruism is greater in the taking than in the giving frame. And the hypothesis number two, we are claiming that the framing effects are different in gender subgroups due to gender-specific cognitive biases such as endowment effect, status quo bias, and entitlement effect. Many of our participants are never married, attained some secondary education, are unemployed, and are very low on the subjective economic well-being that is measured by a 10-point Kandril scale. In terms of the figures that are shown there, figure 1A actually shows the likeliness of framing effect overall, and taking frame is associated with generous transfers, whereas figure 1B shows that framing effects are somewhat greater among males than females. Now looking at the descriptives focusing on task-specific outcomes by gender and frame, we see no significant differences or statistical significant differences in prevalence of transfers between the giving frame and the taking frame for the stranger sub-symbol, both overall and by gender. However, we see statistical significance in prevalence of transfers between two frames by gender for the full symbol and in the opposite direction. In terms of the mean transfers, significance is shown between two frames for both stranger sub-symbol and full symbol, and for males, and eventually for total symbol, suggesting the influence of male group here. The Hadol regression results show that indeed framing effects are present in the aggregate symbol, and the male sub-symbol, irrespective of whether we are focusing on stranger sub-symbol or full symbol. However, for female sub-symbol, only the full symbol shows the framing effect. Turning to the social discounting rate study outcome, there is evidence of positive framing effects for the full symbol as well as the male subgroup across all quantiles. In terms of magnitudes of these effects, male subgroup shows that less altruistically inclined subjects has a higher framing effect compared to the more altruistically inclined subjects. For female sub-symbol, significance is reported only for the more altruistically inclined subjects. So what are the key results that we are deriving in this study? The male subgroup consistently shows that the taking frame is associated with higher transfers and more altruism as we measure it using the K prime value. These significant positive framing effects exist across the altruism inclination as measured by the quantile regression. And the significant positive framing effect reported for the male sub-symbol seems to drive the results for the aggregate symbol. So just to draw the conclusion, we can see that the laboratory results of Krenoki and Booysen rule of non-equivalence in the giving and taking frames of the dictator game, here it traveled to the field setting of young male adults in South Africa. And on aggregate, there is a strong entitlement effect and endowment effect, but mainly among young male adults, which may provide support for the success of opt-out strategies over opt-in strategies. Amount not taken should enter in the dictator's utility function as a fourth argument. There is also support of the argument that the cold prick of taking is stronger than the warm glow of giving in male subgroup of this South African symbol. Thank you.